For 200 years, the galaxy thought humanity was weak, too kind, too soft, too slow to anger. We built peace with patience and buried our demons in diplomacy. But today they executed a child on live broadcast. And now, the last kind word from Earth has been spoken. They called him Elias Wren, though titles meant little in the halls of Kepler's grace. Humans didn't hold power here. Not formally. Not publicly. Yet when the 12 species of the Accord clashed, it was always Elias they turned to. Not because he commanded fleets or issued threats, but because he never raised his voice. Never lost composure. Never forgot a single insult. And over time, even the most arrogant species began to learn. There was something dangerous behind that patience. The Volcari never learned. They strutted through the upper tiers of the station like entitled war gods, all scales and sneers, posturing with that cold-blooded arrogance that came from centuries of conquest. Their ambassador, Threx, leaned across the negotiation table, slitted eyes gleaming. "You humans should be grateful," he hissed. "Peace was never your right. We let you speak here out of politeness." Elias gave no reaction. He simply blinked once, slow, almost amused. "I appreciate your honesty," he said calmly. "Would you like me to prepare a written apology for existing, or will your ego be satisfied with verbal submission?" The room froze. A low wraithy gasping shifted uneasily in its exodome. The GLYR collective diplomat chirped in binary static. Even Threx paused, off balance for the first time in years. Elias leaned back in his seat, hands folded. "Careful," Threx said quietly. "You're starting to sound like you've grown a spine." Elias smiled. "We always had one. You just mistook our stillness for softness." The meeting adjourned in tense silence. Later that night, Elias stood in his quarters, watching footage of a Volcari inspection team dragging a Terran mining foreman across the ground, boots slamming into his ribs. No weapons. No defense. Just a man begging to see his children. The recording cut to static. No charges were filed. No apology was issued. It was one of many such broadcasts. There would be more tomorrow. He stared at the blank screen long after the feed ended. A small panel blinked amber beside his desk. Encryption level 9. He entered the passphrase. "Ours by endurance." The file opened. Gardenfall. He didn't touch it. Not yet. But he didn't close it either. The next morning, Threx arrived flanked by soldiers, illegal on neutral ground, but none dared confront them. They brought evidence of human espionage. A data rod containing falsified coordinates near Volcari space. Elias was expected to grovel, deny, explain. Instead, he said nothing. He simply stared at the rod as if it were dirt. "You will issue a public apology," Threx demanded. "Or we will begin seizing Terran vessels found near our borders." Elias turned to his aide. "Send a message to Earth. Inform them the Volcari have escalated to direct threats. Begin contingency review." Threx sneered. "What will you do? Negotiate us to death?" "No," Elias said softly. "Not this time." When the envoy left, Elias locked the door, turned off his comm, and opened the Gardenfall file again. It contained 3 buttons: Review Assets, Status Check, and Activate. He pressed the first. The screen filled with long-dormant assets, stealth satellites buried inside moons, AI drones still reporting from hidden watch posts, Leviathan-class black site vessels in cryo-orbit. Most hadn't received commands in over a century. All were operational. A chime echoed. "Incoming broadcast." He answered. "Elias," said the voice on the other end, Cal Tren, Earth's defense coordinator. "You're not really doing this. They killed another family. Executed the children. Smiled while they did it." "I saw," Cal replied. "And I want blood too. But you know what Gardenfall means. Once it starts, there is no diplomacy," Elias finished. "I know." Cal hesitated. "Do you have Earth Council's approval?" "I have what matters." He ended the call. Later that cycle, He stood alone in the observatory, watching the curve of the Dyson sphere's shattered ring spin in the distance like a broken crown. For 2 centuries, humans had played the role of caretakers. Patient. Forgiving. Always hoping the galaxy would grow up. But patience, when stretched past its edge, does not snap like a thread. It shatters like glass. He remembered his mother's words, whispered during wartime, when bombs fell on Earth like rain. Never be first to strike, she'd said. But never be last to end it. His calm lit up again. This time, from the Accord chairwoman, a Solari woman with 12 minds, each calculating probability. We've received news, she said. Your diplomatic immunity has been challenged. The Vokari are calling for your arrest. Tell them I'm unavailable. Elias replied, and disconnected. He walked to the console and pressed activate. Somewhere in the black of Sol's system, an AI the size of a continent opened its eyes. The humans on Earth slept that night, unaware that their patience had finally broken. And the stars would never forget the sound. The transmission hit every screen on Kepler's Grace at once. No warning. No encryption. Just the raw, unedited footage. 3 humans, 2 adults and a child, on their knees under the scorched twin suns of the Vokari outer colony. Bound, bloodied, silent. Soldiers circled them, weapons raised. One officer read from a scripted indictment. Spying. Trespassing. Intent to destabilize Vokari sovereignty. The man tried to speak. He was kicked in the ribs. The woman clutched the child. No mercy was given. The soldiers fired. The feed cut to black. Elias didn't move. His aides whispered in horror. Diplomatic channels buzzed with outrage. The Accord Council demanded answers. But Elias simply stood, walked out of the chamber, and locked himself inside the calm vault beneath the Terran embassy. He stood in front of the interface for 13 minutes. Then, with deliberate precision, he entered an access code that hadn't been used in over 200 years. The signal raced home. Mars Control received it in silence. No spoken words. Just the code word. Guard and fall. Execute. Satellites that hadn't moved in decades flickered to life in the asteroid belts. Automated factories on Europa opened with the hiss of ancient airlocks. Files buried beneath the Pacific Ocean decrypted line by line. And at the edge of Neptune's orbit, a Leviathan stirred. Not a ship, not a drone, something else. Something older than most species' histories. Within 2 hours, Earth sent a message to the Accord. It was not a declaration of war. It was not even a statement. It was a courtesy. To all Accord species. We have retracted all peace protocols. Guard and fall is live. Do not interfere. The Vokari response was expected. Laughter. Dismissal. They called it bluff. They always had. They reminded the galaxy how many wars they'd won. How many colonies they'd broken. They reminded the Accord that humans hadn't fired a shot in 2 centuries. They didn't remind anyone what happened the last time humanity did. Because no one alive remembered. 3 standard hours after Elias gave the order, every Vokari communications relay within 5 light years of Earth went dark. No explosions. No noise. Just silence. Clean and total. Then came the precision strikes. Not cities. Not civilians. Just weapons. Just military command nodes, fleet dry docks, orbital defense nets. All vaporized in under 6 minutes. Vokari defense commanders screamed over open comms. There was nothing to fight. No enemy to aim at. The attacks came from nowhere. By the time they targeted one position, it was already gone. The Terran systems weren't attacking. They were unmaking. Aboard the Vokari warship Karish Vel, Admiral Yuan barked orders to fire on blind telemetry. His bridge screens scrambled. Then froze. One line of human script appeared across every console. Peace was never weakness. The ship went dark. Back on Kepler's Grace, the Accord Emergency Summit devolved into panic. Delegates demanded to know who gave Elias authority. How Earth could justify a unilateral act of aggression. Elias stepped into the chamber unarmed, calm, his eyes devoid of any pretense of diplomacy. You watched them murder a child, he said, his voice razor flat. You watched them do it with a smile. And now you want a justification? The HFY ambassador buzzed sharply. You violated Accord law. Elias didn't blink. So did they. We just kept the receipts. You're destabilizing the galaxy. No. I'm correcting it. The Solari envoy rose, trembling. If humanity breaks the Accord breaks apart. Then it was never worth saving, Elias said coldly. A voice crackled over the chamber comms, an open distress call from Vokari space. This is High General Krav of the Vokari Command Fleet. We are under systemic attack. Entire sectors are. The signal cut. The room went silent. Elias looked at the council. We begged for civility. For restraint. For respect. For 2 centuries, we did everything in our power to avoid becoming the thing you feared. He stepped forward. You wanted to see what happens when humanity's patience runs out. Congratulations. The room didn't argue. By the next day, over 70 Vokari military installations were gone. Not crippled. Erased. No debris. No trace. Just void. In their place were black cubes, hovering silently. Drones. Probes. Warnings. Each bore a message in common galactic script. This is restraint. Do not ask for the alternative. Vokari envoys pleaded for ceasefire. They claimed sabotage. They blamed rogue elements. Elias refused contact. Earth refused comment. Accord councils broke into factions, some ready to side with Earth, others demanding Terran sanctions. None moved. Because in every system, satellites began whispering in Terran code. Silent sentinels. Inactive, for now. Behind closed doors, the truth spread. Earth had never disarmed. Never disbanded. They had simply waited. Planned. Hidden. And now, they had a system-wide grip on every major Accord race's infrastructure. The longer they had been ignored, the deeper they had embedded. No one dared speak it aloud. But everyone knew. The humans hadn't attacked the Vokari. They had prepared for this day for centuries. And when it came, they didn't hesitate. Not because they enjoyed violence, but because there was no other language the galaxy respected. Elias sat alone in his quarters, staring at the void. Not proud. Not triumphant. Just still. A message blinked on his personal terminal. Status, Phase 1 complete. Awaiting instruction. He typed only one word. Observe. Then he leaned back and closed his eyes. There would be more noise. More fear. More blame. But none of it mattered. The line had been crossed. The debt collected. The galaxy had made its choice. And now it would live with the consequences. The Vokari homeworld burned without fire. Orbital scans didn't show debris, only absence. Shipyards gone. Missile silos gone. Command relays vaporized in patterns too precise for chaos. They had no time to respond. No target to strike back at. Because nothing was there. No fleets. No soldiers. Just silence wrapped around precision. And in the vacuum, something worse than war, helplessness. On Kepler's grace, the Accord Council chamber echoed with confusion. Delegates barked theories. Cyberwarfare. Mutiny. Mass hallucination. No one dared name what they all knew. That Earth had acted with intent, discipline, and terrifying control. The HFY envoy finally spoke the words no one wanted to. This was not retaliation. It was a rehearsal. Elias didn't speak. He listened, arms folded behind his back, watching them unravel. Let them guess. Let them flinch at shadows. They'd always mistaken stillness for softness. But humanity hadn't been waiting to strike. They'd simply waited to be left no choice. When the Vokari's surviving generals sent a coded plea for ceasefire, the AI Leviathan, now fully awakened in orbit of Saturn, answered before Elias could. It intercepted their transmission, filtered out emotion, and responded in a single line of neutral text. Stand down. Or vanish. The message was forwarded, not just to the Vocari, but to every Accord power. It bypassed security. It arrived unrequested, unfiltered. Some dismissed it as a bluff. Others began purging Terran code from their systems, only to find none. Because the infection was not in the software. It was in the design. For the last 2 centuries, humanity had contributed to every major planetary infrastructure upgrade. They'd provided defense schematics, AI regulation standards, satellite network protocols. The Accord had accepted them gratefully. Gratefully, and blindly. And now, every network system had one thing in common. A line of Terran code, buried so deep it had become indistinguishable from the machine. Elias stood before the council once more, summoned without invitation. No formal request. No mediation attempt. He simply walked into the chamber like he had every right. The chairwoman stood to confront him. You've destabilized the entire Accord in 2 cycles. No, Elias replied, calm but final. We revealed what was already broken. You're dictating terms through fear. We offered peace for 200 years. You called it submission. We let you abuse our patience, and you interpreted it as weakness. That's not on us. The Tormathai ambassador hissed. You'll destroy the balance of the galaxy. There was never a balance. Elias snapped. There was tolerated cruelty, managed silence, and layers of polite denial. What you're witnessing now isn't destruction. It's correction. A brief silence followed. Then the Vocari ambassador limped into the chamber. No guards. No fanfare. Just shame radiating from every step. He dropped to one knee before Elias, claws pressed flat to the floor. We surrender, he said. Unconditionally. Murmurs spread like fire. Elias didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He simply turned to the Accord and spoke with a weight they had never heard from him before. This is not conquest. It is consequence. The Accord fractured. A faction of member species demanded sanctions against Earth. Others called for Earth's expulsion from the Council. But none acted. Because satellites in their skies began to blink. Because starports stopped receiving commands from their own NAV cores. Because orbital defense rings suddenly showed gaps they hadn't seen before. None of these were attacks. No lives were lost. No planets burned. But everyone understood what Elias had already known. This war wasn't fought with missiles. It was fought with certainty. Certainty that Earth could erase their fleets without lifting a finger. Certainty that the Leviathans floating in deep orbit were not bluffs, but relics of a time when humanity had clawed its survival from extinction. Certainty that every quiet, apologetic Terran engineer had left behind something with teeth. The Solari diplomat tried a different approach. What do you want? Tribute? Territory? Elias met her gaze. We want compliance. To what? To a future where murder isn't broadcast to a peaceful station without consequence. Where smug empires don't execute children and expect the galaxy to move on. Where peace means peace, not exploitation under diplomatic immunity. The chamber listened. The implication was clear. This wasn't revenge. This was a red line being drawn, with a blade. The council recessed. Some called emergency meetings. Others packed bags, ready to leave before Earth decided its patience hadn't snapped far enough. Back in his quarters, Elias received a message marked with Earth's highest encryption clearance. It wasn't from the Defense Council. It wasn't even from a human. It was from the Leviathan AI. Authorization complete. It read. Phase 2, dormancy unless provoked. Awaiting override. Recommendation, withdraw all assets slowly. Let them imagine more. Elias didn't reply. He didn't need to. He stared at the stars, each one silent, each one watching. The Accord hadn't fallen. It had changed. And they all knew the new truth. The galaxy wasn't afraid of humans because of what they did. It was terrified because of how little they needed to do to break everything. They didn't expect him to return. 3 days after the Vocari's surrender, the council chamber lights dimmed as Elias Wren stepped through the doors, uninvited but unopposed. No guards blocked him. No protocols halted him. He walked with the weight of finality, the kind that doesn't ask for permission. The delegates had argued for hours behind closed doors, how to respond, how to resist, how to salvage pride. But when he entered, they fell silent, each face shifting from indignation to dread. He placed a single device on the center table and spoke before anyone else could. This holds evidence of every Vocari war crime committed in the past 70 years. Verified by neutral observers. Data sealed by your own compliance algorithms. Most of you knew. All of you tolerated it. The chairwoman shifted uncomfortably. We had diplomatic processes. No, Elias interrupted, tone surgical. You had excuses. The Tormathai envoy raised a clawed finger. This isn't how peace is made. I'm not here for peace, Elias said sharply. I'm here to bury the lie that passed for peace. What comes after is up to you. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. Each sentence landed like a gavel, measured and absolute. The Accord had always prided itself on bureaucracy, believing endless words could dilute cruelty. But now there were no debates, no amendments. Just truth delivered like a blade. The Solari delegate leaned forward. You've already dismantled a military empire. You control the fear of every system. What more do you want? Balance, Elias said without hesitation. Not in treaties. In memory. For centuries you've painted us as the gentle ones. The harmless ones. That ends now. Every species here will integrate Terran history into your educational networks. You will remember why Earth chose patience in the first place. You want obedience. No, Elias said coldly. I want a future where we never have to do this again. That only happens if the galaxy fears the consequences of forgetting. The Vocari delegate, no longer robed in command regalia, spoke for the first time, voice low and brittle. We lost everything in days. You didn't just outgun us. You outprepared us. You were already inside. Elias nodded once. And we never had to pull the trigger until you handed us the reason. The Vocari's eyes flicked to the council. We weren't the only ones committing atrocities. You all knew. You all led us. He turned back to Elias. So why start with us? Because you broadcast it, Elias said simply. Because you made a spectacle of cruelty and dared us to watch. Silence followed. No one spoke. No one argued. Elias activated the device. A projection filled the room, not of war or violence, but of a Terran classroom. Children laughing. A history lesson in progress. Maps. Dates. Names. Then, the screen shifted, old war footage, raw and unfiltered. Earth's darkest eras, played without pause. We teach every child what happens when we forget who we are, Elias said. What we're capable of. You will do the same. Not because I demand it, but because the alternative is this. He gestured to the void in the center of the hologram, the shattered remains of Vocari orbital infrastructure spinning in perfect stillness. You thought we were your caretakers. We were your warning. The council's silence became agreement, not spoken, but shared in exchanged glances, slow nods, subtle admissions. Power hadn't just shifted. The terms of civilization had. After the meeting, Elias received a secure message from Earth, encrypted short. Return status? He replied. Stabilizing. No resistance. Then, after a pause, he added. Initiate cultural rebalancing. Begin with Vocari systems. Later that night, as he reviewed satellite reports, a second message came, this one from the Leviathan AI orbiting Neptune. Projected compliance trajectory, 97.6%. Strategic footprint achieved. Recommend containment posture for next 80 cycles. Elias didn't smile. He didn't feel victory. Only weight. The kind that stays in the bones long after the weapon is dropped. He stared at the stars beyond the station's viewport. Once, he'd looked at them with wonder. Now they looked back, wary, watchful. The galaxy understood now. Earth hadn't wanted dominance. It had wanted room to breathe. And when that room was denied, the answer had never been rage. It had been inevitability. A soft tone signaled an incoming direct message. It was from a child. Vocari, judging by the dialect, routed through a translator filter. The text was simple. "Why didn't you stop them earlier?" He stared at it, unmoving. Then slowly typed back. "Because we were still hoping someone else would." He powered down the terminal and stood. The war was over. But the memory had just begun. He didn't attend the final tribunal. Elias watched the proceedings from orbit, sitting alone in the dark, Earth a distant blue flicker on the display. On Kepler's Grace, 12 representatives stood under the harsh white lights of the assembly, reading aloud the official resolution. It wasn't called a surrender. It wasn't called an apology. Just a realignment accord. But every species knew what it truly was, a reckoning sealed in documentation. The Vocari agreed to total demilitarization. Not because they wanted peace, but because the alternative still floated in the void, cloaked, silent, patient. The Leviathans hadn't moved since the end of Gardarfall, yet their presence had replaced any need for further demonstration. They didn't threaten. They didn't speak. They just waited. And the galaxy learned what true deterrence looked like. Across the Accord systems, a shift began, textbooks updated, histories corrected, narratives rewritten to include not just humanity's diplomatic patience, but also the consequence of its erosion. Human advisors were no longer dismissed as idealists. They were now followed, quoted, feared in whispers and respected in silence. A broadcast ping lit up Elias's console. "You're not coming down?" Cal's voice cracked with static from the council tower. "Everyone's waiting," Elias answered without turning. "Let them wait. They already got what they wanted. You won. No one wins when the price is remembering why you were capable of it." Cal didn't respond for a moment. Then his voice lowered. "The Vocari Youth Program was dismantled. They're building new educational centers, based on Terran models. Ethics training, history, philosophy. It's happening. They're actually changing." Elias exhaled slowly. "Then maybe this won't have to happen again." "You don't sound relieved." "I'm not here to feel good," he said quietly. "I'm here to make sure they don't forget." The screen dimmed. Somewhere on the station, children of multiple species played on a zero-G track. Among them, a Vocari child sprinted beside a Terran. The younger ones didn't understand yet. But they would. That was the point. The galaxy didn't need another empire. It needed memory with teeth. Later, Elias stood on the observation deck of the orbital garden dome. There was no crowd. No ceremony. Just wind cycling through artificial air, pushing the leaves of a tree he had planted years before, back when diplomacy was still hope, not strategy. A soft step approached. It was a young Accord intern, half Solari, half Tauran. Nervous but determined. She carried a data slate and offered it wordlessly. He glanced at the title, Post-Gardenfall, an objective record of events. He handed it back. "It's not objective. It's neutral," she offered. "Nothing about what happened was neutral." He paused, then looked her in the eye. "But if you want to write the truth, start here. Earth didn't attack. Earth responded. That distinction is everything." She nodded. "And after? After?" Elias's gaze returned to the stars. "We waited. Again." The AI Leviathan registered the gesture and sent a silent pulse across the Terran defense web. Hold position. Remain dormant. Observe. The Accord, now restructured, operated under new terms, peace not enforced by treaties, but by precedent. Not everyone liked it. But no one challenged it. And the systems began, slowly, to hold themselves accountable. They had seen what happened when one species ran out of patience. The whispers didn't fade. They grew, quiet bedtime stories told to alien children in hushed tones. Never mock the humans. Never push them. Never assume they won't fight. On a frontier station months later, an altercation broke out. An envoy from a fringe war clan insulted a Terran delegate. Nothing violent. Just loud, aggressive posturing. The human stood there, silent. Smiling. The room fell quiet. The war clan backed down without a fight. Not because the human moved. But because they didn't. That was the new fear. Not the threat of retaliation. But the waiting. The calculation behind calm eyes. The knowledge that, if Earth stood still, it was not peace. It was warning. Back in orbit, Elias typed one final message into the Leviathan Protocol console. Status: retract guard and fall. A prompt appeared. Are you sure? He stared for a long time before answering. Not yet. He closed the terminal and walked toward the growing tree, leaves dancing in artificial wind. Peace didn't mean forgetting. It meant remembering correctly, and with clarity sharp enough to cut through denial. No monuments would be built. No medals awarded. Just lessons, embedded into every school, every council vote, every whispered debate in dark halls. And across the stars, one truth settled deeper than any law. Earth had broken its silence. And the universe would never make the mistake of asking it to speak again.